Years ago, religious science was starting to grow in the early 30s, and there was a need for an outreach, another church. And so Dr. Holmes chose a gentleman to open up a branch church, a satellite church, if you will, in Hollywood, California. He did not want another Ernest Holmes walking around on the planet, but he chose a person who has a personality of his own, and that was in 1930 A.D. He's been the pastor for the Hollywood Church of Religious Science for 64 years. 64 years. And in January, I helped hundreds of people celebrate his 98th birthday. 98. To me, he is religious science. He's Mr. Religious Science. Help me welcome my friend, Dr. Robert H. Bitzer.
You don't know what this moment really means to me. It's a tremendous moment. I'm sorry you all weren't there in B.C. with me. But those of you who were, I remember deeply. And I know that we're going on and on and on. There's so much I would like to say to you this morning, and I really don't know where to begin, and I'll never stop. Because I'm going to leave some ideas within you. They'll keep right on talking to you. So I'll start you going, and you'll keep it up. And see, religious science, I believe, is the only answer to the world's problem. But it isn't going very far in its answer. I think partly it's our fault. I don't think we get around to it. We do too much hemming and hawing and thinking about changing this and changing that and putting a bow here and taking a tie off there. And trivialities. What's our teaching? What are you teaching? What is religious science? You know, I've been talking to several doctors recently, and they said, Dr. Bitzer, what's the secret of your longevity? I said, right thinking. Right thinking? Yes, right thinking. I said, right thinking, knowing that there's a principle of good in the universe that cannot be denied. That's religious science in a nutshell. There's just one mind, God, infinite good. And you and I are that mind in its conscious being, knowing its perfect being. And this one mind manifests through thought. And your thought and my thought makes our world. And when we recognize that just the one mind, good, but realize it's only good. If you don't see it as good, then you don't see it as it is. And if you don't see it as it is, then you're not working with that which is. You're working with a counterfeit. And you know how we struggle with counterfeits and inferiority products. And then when you know there's just the one mind and one power, and you are that mind and power, then you express in that way. One mind operating through your thought. Now what's the inevitable answer? That infinite mind, God is all, and God is good, and God manifests individuality. Now that's where our part comes in, with the individualized expression of this infinite mind. And until we recognize that we are the individualized expression of it, we're not a part of it consciously. And so we have to go back. See, otherwise we shut ourselves off from the source of the power. You know, we're not hermits. And we're not walking the pathway in life alone. We're part of an infinite something. We're all related. And we have to learn to be related without involvement. And that you and I must be related to each other without making demands on each other. That's the secret of individuality. Individuality makes no demand on anyone, only on itself. But I thought I'd like to talk with you this morning a little about how religious science came into being, because I don't really know of anyone that really has the historical reference that I have, and I feel it's very important. Not that I have it, but that you have it, and you recognize what takes place. When I came into, we called it New Thought then, right after the war, I'd been a flyer during World War I, and I went to New York to pursue the study in medicine. I was going to the College of Physicians and Surgeons, and I was going to become an MD. And I had an experience in healing that changed my career, changed my thought, and changed everything in my relationship. And then from that, I began to recognize what was taking place in what we then called the world of metaphysics. Except for Christian Science, the metaphysical world was absolutely unorganized. The International New Thought Alliance was meeting. It had a yearly Congress, and anybody that has been speaking during the year anywhere on anything could come to that meeting and speak once a year, and they did. And you got almost anything. And so there was no pattern. Everything was confusion. And one speaker would get up and say, the only thing that matters in life is love. And then somebody would get up and say, the only thing that matters in life is money. And somebody else, well, you know what I mean, as they did. And each one was trying to out-declare the other one. Well, then I met Ernest Holmes, and he pointed out to me some of the things that were taking place. See, there was the unity teaching in Kansas City. That, of course, was very powerful, but it was not really an organized movement. It never was organized in the sense that Christian Science was, or that even religious science is. But you see, Quimby had started the idea by stating that it is done unto you according to your belief. And so Quimby said, you're not sick in your mind, you're sick in your belief. And it's in your belief that you need to be healed. And then that's why Jesus said, he looked at the man's side of the pool and he said, pick up your bed and walk, thy sins be forgiven thee. And the man got up and walked. And of course everybody then protested that he had to forgive him his sins. And Jesus said, what difference does it make if I say unto him, thy sins are forgiven thee, or get up and walk? And he said, but it does make all the difference in the world. You must know that the Son of Man has power on earth to forgive sins. Not God forgives sins, because thou, God, seest me perfect. But the Son of Man has power to forgive sins. Now, what is a sin? A sin is a failure to hit the bullseye. Sin is anything less than 100% in whatever it is we're doing. If you only got 90% on your test, then you were a sinner. If you only got 20 on your test, you're still a sinner. Now, is 20 a heavier sinner than 90? You see, the only consciousness is completeness. And if you're not complete, it doesn't make a difference how far you're on or how far you're off. A miss is as good as a mile, you know. And so we say, all right, now let's get back on the path. And let's know what we're doing. Now, what was it that Jesus was trying to point out? He was trying to point out that there was a cause that put that man there beside the pool. And the cause was that man's belief. Because we lie in our beliefs. And we sleep in our beliefs. And that man was lying in his belief. Lying in his belief, you see. And so we say, all right. Then he went back and he erased the lie by affirming the truth. And the man got up and walked. I was working in the garden one day, and I had a little pain in my thumb, and I looked down, and there was a thorn, rose thorn, and a little blood. Pulled it out, forgot it. Another day, I was changing a light bulb, and it exploded, and I got a lot of glass out of my hand, but there's a piece of glass I didn't get out of. I didn't know what it was, but I had a lump in my thumb. And I looked at that lump, all right, what caused it? And it didn't get sore, but finally it worked itself out. All right, everything has a cause. Everything has a cause. And you see, these causes are not moral. These causes are concepts, laws that you put over yourself, attitudes that you make the law of your life, and what you're deciding that you yourself must do. Now we say, sure, there are a lot of things that we consider wrong. Thou shalt not kill, and so forth and so on. And you don't take what doesn't belong to you and all that. But those are not the things that Jesus was talking about. Jesus was talking about attitudes. It isn't that somebody steals from you. It's you don't hold your attitude and do with your thought that which you are supposed to do with your thought. And if you let somebody else take a wonderful thought that has come to you to be used by you, and somebody else uses it, and you don't have the benefit of it, all right, then we say you've been robbed. But you see, it's a mental thing. Something takes place in your mind. Well, these people, they recognized, all right, that God was a power. They believed they would sit around in groups. They'd sit around in groups by the hour, and they called it meditation. No, they called it going into the silence. And in those days, everything was go into the silence. Go into silence. You go into silence. And it was a state of nothingness, and they would sit around in the silence, and a group of 6 or 8, or maybe longer, and they could sit almost by the hours. And they got so confused and so mixed up, they didn't know up or down. And you see, that's what Ernest looked at. He said, look at those people. They sit around going around in circles. They're saying, I can't do it because Spirit hasn't told me. What do they think they are? Why do they have minds? Does Spirit give them minds to become vacuums or become dove treads? They have minds because Spirit has awakened in them an individualization. And so it's up to them to individually declare what it is they're going to do. I went back to New York one time to take class with one of the teachers I'd been studying with. I said, are you going to give a class this fall? Our Spirit hasn't told me yet. Well, I won't say what I said. And I knew it was her own mind that hadn't made itself up. Don't kid people with that stuff that you're waiting for Spirit to tell you. You're waiting to make up your mind to get an idea. And if you don't have an idea, you say, well, Spirit hasn't told me yet. Now, that's what Ernest Holmes saw. And that was his metaphysical state at the time that he came into the fore. There was all this indecision, people waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. Now, nice people, and please don't think that I'm criticizing them. I'm just recognizing they hadn't been trained. They had not found a teacher. No one had told them what to do. And you see, then because they were in that state of mind, then there was no coordinating center. Now, Ernest said, if a thing is so, there's a way in which it's so. And you see, in those days, a teacher would say, or advanced children would say, oh, that's above you, dearie. You'll get there someday, but you can't understand that now, and I can't tell you. And there again we said, well, I won't say what he said, but it commences with B. And so you see, we come back with the idea. Ernest said, if it works, it's the way it works. And if it works for one person, it works for every person. And that, you see, was the thing that put the pin in the bubble, in the balloon, that we called the New Thought movement that day, because people were made to know no one had a peculiar access to the infinite mind, and no one had a market on truth, and truth would manifest for any individual that recognized it and accepted it. And so then that commenced to work out in that way. Now, I don't want you to think this was a bad period. It wasn't. We had in New York City, we had Dr. W. John Murray. He was pastor of the Church of Divine Science, or the Church of the Healing Christ, and he met in the old grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria. And he had a distinguished audience every Sunday morning of 1,500 people. It in those days was a tremendous audience. And he had wonderful, prominent people. And he gave great impetus to the movement itself. And later on, that same church became the church that Emmett Fox took over. And now we're commencing to see a sense of order, because Dr. Murray brought a sense of order into the idea and brought it in that way. And then there was in New York at the same time a woman by the name of Mary Chapin. And I studied with her. And she was a graduate of Radcliffe, a stunning woman over 7 feet tall, and a tremendous force of power. But it was just an individual message. There's no linking up with a universal whole. You see, it wasn't until Truett came along that people commenced to recognize it's all done because of a principle. See, Quimby didn't say it was a principle. He said, it's your belief. It's my belief. He didn't link it up with a principle of truth, that is, whether you believe it or not. And so these people then commenced to individualize, but they still hadn't linked it up with a principle and brought through. Now, then Ernest Holmes then said, all right, now the thing that we need to do is to bring a sense of order into this movement. There is a way in which it works, and you can understand that way and work it. And so whenever you'd bring anything mysterious to him, he'd say, let's look at it. Let's see what causes it. He didn't believe in miracles as something not based upon our law. And he didn't believe that things just happened. He believed that always there was a cause. And therefore we're looking for that cause, that everything that we brought to into manifestation. And so Mrs. Chapin and Dr. Murray and Orson Swett Martin, he published a magazine in New York. Also, he was a metaphysical writer. His books published into 28 million copies and were translated into every language in the world. And he was a tremendous force. It was all more or less just the goodwill message. How to do it message, yes. But she's not based upon a sense of law and sense of order. I believe that you have to know you're part of an infinite something. You didn't create yourself. You're part of this infinite mind, and in being part of its infinite mind, you absorb its creative purpose, and it becomes your purpose and your motive of action where you are now. All right? Now that's different, you see. That's linking us up with something that's eternal. See, that's what we need, the feeling, the recognition that life isn't just what you and I experience in this little span that we have. We're part of an infinite something that can never cease to be and can never die. And we're part of its infinite power and its infinite mind. And so then we commence to work in that way. I think Ernest and I had a lot of arguments back there in the early days. I was pastor of a church in Boston, which had been founded by Dr. Julie Seaton, a tremendous speaker, an MD who had gone into metaphysics, a wonderful consciousness of healing, a wonderful understanding, but quite a concept of life itself, because she believed in masters and contacting with masters and degrees and so forth and so on. And very interesting. All that is wonderful. And then you see we've got all the different movements that did believe in degrees. And then a person would come and say, oh, I'm on the 4th degree. And, oh, no, you're not even on the second yet. And I'm on the fourth. And, well, someday maybe I'll get on the fourth too, you see. Well, now Ernie says that's all a lot of bunk. That's all a lot of bunk. There are no degrees in truth. There are no degrees in truth. There's no hierarchy in truth. Hierarchy is man's concept of how he is going to approach what he may think about truth, or how he wants to govern himself. But remember, the hierarchy is not the truth. And the truth is that God and you, just one. Just one life, just one power. And the truth of you then is that you abide in that consciousness of oneness and that consciousness of wholeness. We had another figure at that time, Elizabeth Town. And she was another one of those how to do it artists, and one of the real pioneers, Brown Landone. She published his books. And she had this publishing house in Holyoke, Massachusetts. And she was a council member in Holyoke, and a wonderful journalist and tremendous woman of power. But again, all of these people lacked a sense of coherence because there was no sense of coordination. Each one was doing his own thing, independent of everybody else, which is all right, except that when we're doing our own thing, we should know that every person we know doing his own thing is related to us and we're related to him. So that together we're all doing these things. We get into a bigger consciousness, you see. We're part of a universal something. See, I don't believe I created myself as you created yourself. I'm an infinite mind that knows its own being and continues its own being by placing its creativity in my hand or in your hand. And so you are infinite God, maintaining the creativity of God in your consciousness, and yet it's the consciousness of God. You see, Jesus said, the Father was in, he doeth the work. He recognized that. And he never assumed that he had any power aside from the Father. He never assumed that people should worship him or bow down to him. He was trying to make people realize we're dealing with a principle. Now let's all get in this principle. Let's all get in this principle and recognize the power of this principle. All right? Then Ernest commenced to formulate things. And he commenced to say, it's all in your mind. It's all in your mind. And then he pointed out there are two phases of your mind. There's your conscious mind and there's your subjective mind. Now you see we're getting a sense of law. It's not just getting into the silence now and making contact with something in the invisible. Now you're bringing yourself to the point of actual expression, of actual manifestation. The one thought that I would like to realize in everyone today is that there's just one mind, and that one mind must dwell in you and think in you as you. And until you reach that place in consciousness, you haven't gotten into the meaning of religious science, understanding exactly what it is we're doing. All right? Then that means you're dependent upon no one. You're dependent upon the power, the infinite mind operating in you to reproduce itself according to your acceptance of it, your concept of it, what you want it to be to you. Now, you see, it brings it down to that point in manifestation, And so when you look back at some of these older books, I hope you'll always keep this in mind, this recognition, that it represented an unfoldment, it represented an expansion, it represented itself of reaching out to fulfill that which we are and to bring it forth as our consciousness and make it manifest in what we are. And I believe we can do this when we recognize this as the power. But what holds it back? Our personal concept. What causes it to go forward? Our personal concept. You see, our imagination can be a good thing. Our imagination can be not so good. Back in the Old Testament, It said, why did the people rage so furiously together? And the prophet answered, the people rage so furiously together because they've imagined a vain thing. You see, imagination is neither good nor bad. Imagination is a tool that you can use, but not one that you have to use. But when you use imagination, you have to recognize you are controlling and you're telling that imagination what to do. And that imagination can imagine you're a sinner. And in its imagination of you as a sinner, it can bring all kinds of negative experiences before you. And you have to experience those. Why? Because you image them. And until you free yourself from the image. Now that's why we say the Son of Man hath power on earth to forgive sin. You have power to wipe out images of limitation, images in which you think your success is dependent upon the death of your grandmother. And until your father dies, you'll never have the freedom that you want. And until something happens to the people where you are, you'll never get the promotion. See, those are the sins that Jesus was referring to. Those are the mental concepts, you see, that hold you back. Hold you back. We respect authority. Sure, we respect authority. But you know, if we don't respect authority, it's because we don't have the concept of this power manifesting as a completeness of being. We're too prone to judge ourselves in the light of somebody else. Oh, he's far more successful than I am. Is he? How do you know? Are you more successful than I am? Who knows? Am I more successful than my father was? Who knows? And when we try to answer those things, that's when we're getting into what we call the sinning, because we're missing our contact. We're getting away from the things that as they happen. You see, we're dependent on divine principle and not on the way in which we think things should work out. We depend on divine principle. Now, there's something you can decide in your life. This is what you're going to do. And you put this image in front of yourself. Now, this is the image you're going to fulfill. This is the image you're going to fulfill. All right, now, how are you going to fulfill it? Well, do you know? Then if you know, you're departing from divine principle. If you know, that's why you see the know-it-alls always off principle. The person that knows everything is always off principle, you see, because he knows everything, therefore he obstructs the infinite flow, which is trying to find its manifestation. So we say, all right, well, now come back within yourself. There's something right here. Now I want to do it. I don't know how to do it. Is that a scientific statement? Of course not. Then what do? I affirm the one mind in me knows that my concept to be free from this situation is acceptable, is complete, and is manifest, and is now established as reality. I don't have to know how it's going to come back. I don't have to know how it's going to come back. When I first went into the ministry, I was offered this church in Boston. I didn't have the money to go. But I knew I'd have it, and I simply kept affirming. Well, my teacher, Mary Chapin, came in, and, oh, Rob, I want you to take this sum of money to help you get started. I said, thank you, but I don't start on borrowed money. Thank you just the same. And I could have gotten money from my father. That wouldn't have been it either. And there were other sources that came forth to offer loans and things like that. I don't like to borrow money because I hate to pay it back. And then the answer is, then don't borrow it. All right? And I knew I depended upon divine principle. And then just a week before I was to go to Boston, I got a letter from my father, and in it was closed a check. And he said, I'm closing a check for your percentage, your portion of the timber that was sold on your grandfather's property down in Mississippi. Wasn't that amazing? I didn't even know there was timber there. And I didn't know anybody in the South had guts enough to get out and sell the timber. See, all that. So you see, it was completely out of my consciousness, so that even subconsciously, even subconsciously. I didn't lean on that property down in Mississippi. I lean completely divine intelligence. I depend on divine principle, and divine principle brings through the perfect and the complete manifestation. See, we go to our lawyer. Do we depend on our lawyer, or we depend on divine principle? We go to our financier. Are we depending on the bank statements and what our financial advisor tells us? Are we depending on the principle? Are you depending on the principle or the money in the bank? Are you depending on the principle or your income? Now, we understand the way in which we are establishing lawyers. You depend on the principle, which includes the perfect manifestation of everything that concerns you. So that whether it's money, whether it's health, whether it's food, whether it's love, whether it's friendship, whatever it is, it all comes because of the concept that you've depended on divine principle, and divine principle brings it through and makes it manifest. I think this is our challenge in the great age in which we're living. And I want to meet that challenge, and you want to meet that challenge. And I want to know that our understanding of truth is so great and so complete that then we can speak our word for that which we want to appear. And we'll have the conviction that something happens when we speak our word. It acts upon a law of mind. It causes me to believe. And after all, that's the only thing you have to convince yourself. And if you're not demonstrating, then you don't believe you're demonstrating. And if you're not demonstrating, then why don't you commence to believe that you're demonstrating? Now, how are you going to commence that you believe? Or are you going to affirm? Every thought I think is manifest in infinite mind, and I know it. Now, Jesus said to the one man, he said, Lord, help thou mine unbelief. All right? Now, my belief right now is made perfect in knowing. My belief is made perfect in knowing. So that right now, that which I believe is established as the truth in my consciousness, and therefore I accept it, and I bring it to right here and right now. We see many times two people in the same circumstances, and each one prospers or expressed in a different way. And we say, oh, yes, it's because of the belief of the individual. All right? Who makes you believe as you believe? Who makes you believe as you believe? Well, of course, I say we're born into the home, and we're born in order to get the experiences that we ourselves want to have in order to continue our growth. I don't believe we're ever in a situation for growth. I'm going to repeat that. I don't believe you're ever in a situation for growth. The infinite mind does not test you, and you're never put in a situation to see how you'll react. I believe that sometime when a situation is very difficult, and there's something within us that has created it as difficult. Why? To make us assert ourselves and rise above it. You know, I don't think a horse wins a race by just simply sauntering through the strip. There's something that must keep him going. And I believe that when you and I have a concept of what we want to do, and we keep at it, and we keep ourselves at it, keep bringing yourself back to the line. Now, do you believe this or don't you? All right? If you're not demonstrating, you don't believe it. Then what are you going to do? Sit down and weep? Tell all your friends how bad off you are and how sympathetic they should be and how sorry they should be for you? And then you find yourself get thicker and thicker in the mire, and first thing you know, you're so deep that you want to even pull the universe in around you. That's what causes earthquakes. And so you see, that's right. You helped cause the earthquake. All right. Now let's come back then. Let's come back. That you're the consciousness of truth knowing itself. And you, as the truth knowing itself, you're going to stay in that consciousness of wholeness and that consciousness of completeness. Speak your word in power. Now tell yourself you believe. If you don't believe, tell yourself over again you believe. If you don't believe, Tell yourself over again. Why do you think governments spend millions and billions of dollars in propaganda? Because they help people believe. And they know that people are susceptible to belief. Why does the tobacco industry make such headway in all of its advertising? Because it keeps talking to people who believe, and they believe over, and they keep believing. They keep believing. Now, but suppose we said there's a principle, nothing comes to you except God as you. I believe that. All right, now let's say it over again. Nothing comes to me except God as me. Nothing comes to me except God as me. The old church had an Apostles' Creed based upon belief. I can't say that I don't have to go into that. We've got affirmation of truth too. How do we use it? Do you believe our affirmations of truth? Do you believe our affirmation of being? So that's what we do come back to. You believe that your word is the created word. All right. Can you move mountains? Well, but what can you move? I moved a thorn from my finger. That changed the whole law of causation in the entire world. Because when I refused to let that thorn disrupt the organization of the universe, that's right. When you remove pain from your life, you're removing an obstruction in the universal mind. And you're removing a dissension that doesn't belong in the universe. And you're declaring your freedom. You're taking it from that. You're bringing it out, making it a part, not letting it be a part of you. You're in the consciousness of wholeness and the consciousness of completeness. Don't be afraid. Work on your belief. And don't be afraid to know what you believe. I don't think it's necessary for us to shout our belief everywhere we go. But I do think it's necessary when we sit down and people want to give us an outpouring of all kinds of viciousness and negation. I believe that we should constantly be saying, every word you say is a lie. Every word you say is a lie. Every word you say is a lie. There's not a word of truth in it. See, whenever you hear a negative thing, do something about it. Don't just shrug your shoulders. If you hear a negative thing, it's moved into your environment. Why? So that you will know you are supreme to it and you get rid of it and it has no power over you. And get into this consciousness, wholeness, and completeness, infiniteness being. Let the infinite mind come through. I think you can see why it's so important that we stick to our religious science organization. That we see, yes, we are based upon realization that mind, that God, that good is all. And God operates through thought according to our belief. And there's no limit to what we can believe now or in the future. And therefore, we open ourselves now to the consciousness, wholeness, and completeness of being. Oh God, give us the whirlwind vision. Let us see clear-eyed thy flame creation we call earth, and man thy shining desire like unto it. Let the new age come swifter to the birth, when man this thy earth shall call itself divine, and mortals, waking from their dream of sense, shall ask no sign, no proof, no message. Man's larger sight, the inevitable answer. Thank you.